We were invited by my brother. Since he called us, we're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you, Ashley. I work in the finance sector. My husband, who I'll call Bob, is a car mechanic, and we live in my childhood home. By childhood home, I don't mean that my parents live there. Actually, my family home is a long-standing family business where my father used to be the CEO. I have a brother, and he was originally planned to take over my father's company, so he majored in economics in college. On top of that, my talented brother studied abroad at Oxford University, learned more about business management, returned to the United States, and worked with my father for several years. Eventually, my parents wanted to enjoy their retirement and moved to a place like Aspen, Colorado, seeming to enjoy their relaxed life surrounded by nature. Since my brother was given the company in return, my parents passed down the family home to me, their daughter, and I decided to live there with my husband. The house is conveniently located with excellent access to public transportation, less than a 5-minute walk from the train station. Commercial facilities, hospitals, and schools are also within walking distance. Considering the future, when our children leave the nest, we will be able to live comfortably, so in that sense, I am grateful that my parents gave me this house. We were planning on expanding our family and living happily, but we never thought that our life would come to a sudden end because of such an incident. After moving into this house, my mother-in-law started to visit frequently. Knowing that my parents run a business, my mother-in-law often asks about money since we got married. Hey, Ashley, how much assets do your parents have? When your parents pass away, how much will you inherit? She often talks about these things, and I couldn't help but think that she was rather distasteful. I didn't want to be too blunt, so I replied, I wonder how much. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know. I've already received the house, so I might not get any money. Although I laughed and responded lightly, she said, That can't be true, can it? Your parents are over 60. You never know what might happen. They must have discussed their assets with you. She seemed to be so interested in the asset discussion that at that moment I was convinced that she was counting on my parents' wealth. I already know how much I will receive, but I decided to keep silent, thinking it would be better not to tell my mother-in-law or my husband, who is close to her. However, an unthinkable incident occurred after this. Suddenly, without any notice, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family moved into our house around 8 a.m. on a holiday. The doorbell rang unexpectedly, and when I opened the door, there were movers. Huh? Why are the movers here? As I was surprised and confused, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family arrived and said, We're going to be living here from today, so please take care of us. When I saw their grinning faces, I got chills down my spine. Just then, my husband woke up, and when I asked him to explain the situation, he said nonchalantly, What's the problem if Mom and the others move into this house? It's so spacious, so you should be able to spare some room. He spoke as if it was only natural to give them some space. I was surprised enough that we were living together, but then my sister-in-law said something even more outrageous. We were invited by your brother, Ashley. Since he called us, we're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you, Ashley. About my brother-in-law? He intruded into various rooms without permission and said, This room has good sunlight, so give it to us. Bob, move all the stuff in here out to the hallway. I felt dizzy at this exchange. This is my house, but they are opening rooms here and there, trying to use them as their own. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family have been lacking common sense for a while, especially my sister-in-law, who had rummaged through my bag without permission before. If things continue like this, they'll take over my room. Enough is enough. This is my house. Why are you acting like you own this place? I've had it. I want everyone to get out. I normally don't lose my cool or raise my voice in anger, but having these people move into the house my parents gave me without permission and treating it like it was theirs was something I could not stand. That's why I lost control of my emotions and shouted at all three of them, but then something unexpected happened. How dare you talk to us like that? You're the one who should get out. The moment those words were spoken, I felt a severe pain in my cheek. Wait, did I get slapped? I realized what had happened a few seconds after being hit. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what had happened, and all that was left was a throbbing pain in my cheek. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. It goes without saying. I can't live with people who would do something like this. But this house is mine. I don't want them living here like parasites. I packed up my things to leave the house, intending to inform my family about this. I had to find a place far away from home, so I rented a monthly apartment for the time being. From there, I would have to commute to work. The moment I told my parents about it over the phone, I could tell they were furious, even through the phone, especially my dad. He is very doting and has always adored me and my brother. He was a strict CEO, but as a father, he was always kind and quick to help when we were in trouble. I didn't want to involve my parents, who were just about to retire, in something like this, but I was forced to because my inherited house was being taken away from me. While I was living in the monthly apartment, I was sure that my husband and his family were freely using my house, so I decided to do something that my brother and father suggested. A few days later, I checked my phone during my break and found dozens of missed calls and messages from my husband. Well, I knew why he was calling. I had called the water company and the electric company to cut off the utilities. Our house is all electric, so nothing works without electricity. And we haven't installed solar panels yet, so there's no way to supply electricity. It's very hot right now, so it must be pretty tough without electricity and water. The calls from my husband were probably to do something about it. Just as I was about to ignore it, my husband called again, timing it perfectly with my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no electricity and the water isn't working. You stopped the electricity and water, didn't you?" I could clearly imagine the panicked state my husband was in from his voice over the phone. The house is mine, so now that I'm gone, there's no way I can leave the electricity and water on, right? That's why I had it cut off. If I left the utilities on, I would have to pay the bills even though I'm not living there. I can't accept that, so naturally I had it cut off. At this, my husband was furious and demanded that I renew the contract immediately. Just because he says to renew it doesn't mean I'm going to say, "Okay, I understand." If they want to renew it, they should do it with their own money. But whenever it comes to this, they always say things like, "It's your house, so you should pay." So their words and actions don't match. Anyway, I have no intention of renewing the contract or paying. If you don't like it, then get out of the house right away. After saying only that, I hung up the phone because my break was ending. Afterwards, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law all called me. All of them were saying the same thing. They wanted me to get the electricity and water hooked up. Their room was hot and uncomfortable. They said it was inconvenient without water. But all of this was their problem, not mine. After listening to everything they said, I told them to handle it themselves and hung up the phone. I figured they were just greedy for money and thought they would give up and leave soon. However, even after a week passed, there was no sign of them leaving. So I decided to push them further. I consulted with my father's company's lawyer about the situation and asked him to send a notice to my husband. The content of the notice was about trespassing. They had barged into the house I owned without any consultation, drove me out of it, and were using it as their own. I explained to the four of them, who used this malicious tactic, that I was considering taking legal action. Hey, what's going on? Why did I get such a document from a lawyer? Was it necessary to go this far? My husband, who seemed panicked and not expecting me to go this far, came to me for a settlement. Knowing how concerned they are about their public image, the prospect of being sued would be extremely damaging to them mentally. They definitely want to avoid dealing with a lawyer at all costs. But they don't want to give up their current lifestyle. So they're probably scheming to persuade me to let them continue their current lifestyle. I can see through what my husband is thinking like it's in the palm of my hand. That said, there's no way I can listen to what they have to say. So I didn't comply with my husband. At this, my husband finally exploded in anger, forgetting that he was at work, and yelled at me loudly. "Cut it out. Are you getting carried away? Just because we're a little underhanded doesn't mean you can act so high and mighty. Go back to how things were right now and drop the lawyer." Even though he yelled in anger, it didn't affect me at all. On the contrary, I was annoyed by his phone call, thinking, "Who do you think you are, taking over someone else's house? No matter what you say or shout at me, my feelings won't change. If you continue to squat there, I will take legal action. You better think hard before you act." Over the phone, my husband was still shrieking, but I ignored him and hung up the phone. This is a waste of time. and I've already talked to my lawyer about divorce. When I got home, I'd received calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but I knew they were just going to talk about settling the matter. I didn't want to waste any more time, so I blocked their numbers to prevent further calls. After that, my prideful husband's family couldn't bear the idea of being sued, so they packed their bags and vacated the house. Then, the lawyer intervened, and the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I also had a house cleaning service come in, and finally I was able to return to my sparkling clean house. Living apart from my husband's family and in a monthly rental was comfortable, but of course, living in my own home is the best. The house is pretty worn down in some places, so I need to consider renovating soon. I consulted with my father, and he introduced me to a good contractor, so I started consulting about the renovation. Living alone is really comfortable. I'm not bound by anyone. I can lie around on the sofa without getting scolded. I can eat whatever I want without anyone saying anything. And while I was enjoying my current life, I received a contact from my ex-husband for the first time in 3 months. At first, I didn't answer the phone because I didn't recognize the number. But when the call kept coming from the same number, I thought it might be from a contractor, so I reluctantly answered the phone. However, as soon as I recognized the voice, my mood was completely ruined. It was from my ex-husband, whom I had divorced 3 months ago. I had already divorced him with the intervention of a lawyer. We even made a promise never to approach each other again, so what on earth does he want now? And changing his phone number just to call me is strange, no matter how you look at it. We promised, through our lawyer, not to see or contact each other again. There's nothing left for us to talk about, so please don't contact me anymore. Right as I was about to hang up the phone, "Hold on a minute, please. I just need you to listen. Just for a little while. I'm begging you." With that, he started yapping without any permission from me. Apparently, my ex-husband's company is facing serious financial crisis, and it's decided that his salary will be reduced. My mother-in-law's health is not good, and she is unable to work. My sister-in-law and her husband can't contribute to the living expenses since he isn't working a steady job. My sister-in-law is working multiple part-time jobs, but most of her paycheck is being used to pay off the debt that my brother-in-law made. The situation was desperate as my ex-husband was trying hard to make ends meet. But with his salary getting cut, it will become increasingly difficult to survive. Well, hearing all that, I couldn't think of anything but, "Okay, is that so? Because they intruded into my house without my permission, did whatever they pleased, and then tried to kick me out? It's simply unbelievable. I feel nothing for the people who did such a thing, and I have no sympathy for them. Even if you tell me these things, it doesn't solve anything. It's your family. You should deal with it yourself. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do." At my words, my ex-husband started to panic even more. "Don't say things like that. We're in serious trouble. We won't even be able to pay the rent for the apartment, and we'll be struggling for food tomorrow. Hey, we used to be a family, right? Please help us." He pleaded in a voice close to crying, but I was not convinced. When I was in trouble, he did nothing to help, and he looked down on me along with my mother-in-law. Just like my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law have also always looked down on me. They insulted me for my plain appearance, or for my old-fashioned way of thinking. They told me not to come around because they said I was so stiff and outdated that it was rubbing off on them, and they didn't care how hurt I was. As for my mother-in-law, she not only made things worse, but she also pushed me to have a baby as soon as possible, forced strange herbal medicines on me, made unnecessary doctor's appointments, and told all the neighbors that I was a barren wife. Looking back, there wasn't a single good thing about my marriage. My ex-husband, who used to be so kind before we got married, started to become my mother-in-law's puppet after the wedding. The first day my mother-in-law stormed into our house, I was out because I had an appointment. Apparently, my mother-in-law was upset by this and cried to my husband, "I wanted to see Ashley, but she wasn't there. I want to be friends with Ashley. I'm sad." After hearing his mother cry, my ex-husband yelled at me without listening to my side of the story. She said that she wanted to get along, but all she ever did when we met was badmouth me. "My son seems to have lost weight recently. Is it because your cooking is so bad that he can't eat properly?" She said things like this loudly, whether we were at home or outside, so there was no way we could get along. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law also joined in, laughing at me. I can't help people who act like this anymore. No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't help you guys, so I'm going to hang up now. And don't ever contact me again. With that, I finally hung up the phone and blocked the new number. Knowing my ex-husband, he might change his number and try to contact me again. So, I decided to change my phone number at the store over the weekend. But before that, those four took action. They broke the promise with the lawyer and suddenly came to my house at 11 p.m. "Open up, let us in and take care of us." "We're family, you should help us." They were banging on the door, yelling without considering the time. "Hey, what's the matter at this hour? Please go back home as it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors." When I went to open the door, they seemed ready to barge in, so I figured I'd try talking through the intercom. But the four of them didn't care, started banging on the door and raising a ruckus. I couldn't believe I was dealing with people this out of control. I was left holding my head in my hands. I was considering calling the cops when I heard sirens from outside. It looked like a neighbor had taken the initiative. As soon as they heard the police sirens, the surprised group thought I had called the police and tried to run away. But by then, a crowd had gathered, and escape was not an option. And so, the four of them were escorted to the police station by the responding officers. I was questioned about the incident, and I explained everything that had happened. After that, the word about what my ex-husband and his pals had done spread quickly in the neighborhood. It turned out that among the crowd that had gathered was a co-worker of my ex-husband's, so by the next day, the whole office knew what had happened. He was already having a hard time because of a pay cut, but after getting the police involved, the company wasn't going to let it slide. My ex-husband ended up getting fired and couldn't afford to pay his apartment rent anymore. Money issues caused a rift between him and his sister's family, so their group living situation ended. Now, Bob is living in public housing with his mother, working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. Even his mother has started working part-time a few days a week, desperate to earn money.
Hello there, I'm Alice, a 32-year-old woman. Right now, I'm 9 months pregnant. On this day, my husband and I are driving over to his family's home. It's a mere 30-minute drive from the apartment where we live. It's not far at all, so we tend to visit 2 or 3 times a month. Today, we decided to make a trip after hearing that my mother-in-law was baking her famous apple pie. She's a very sweet lady. After the loss of her husband last year, she was really down and didn't know what to do. But she's recovered now, eagerly waiting for the birth of her grandchild. However, not everyone is thrilled about us having a child. One of those people is my sister-in-law, Brianna. According to mother-in-law, Brianna married 6 years before us, but so far there are no signs of her being pregnant. She even started fertility treatments 2 years ago, but still no baby. With all the pressure from around, she's become quite irritable lately. Mother-in-law had asked us to avoid meeting Brianna as much as possible, so we always tried to visit when she wasn't around. But on this day, to our surprise, Brianna showed up unexpectedly. "Well, long time no see, Alice. You've put on some weight, haven't you? You're not just lazing around at home because you're pregnant, right? You look like a seal, all round and ready to roll down a hill." I was dumbfounded by her immediate and sharp remark. "Hey sis, how can you say something like that right off the bat? She's 9 months pregnant. Of course her belly's gonna be big. You're gonna make enemies with pregnant women all over the world talking like that." My husband quickly jumped to my defense, leaving me speechless. "Oh, please, I'm just thinking about Alice, okay? It's tough if a pregnant woman gets too heavy, you know. I just want Alice to be aware of her responsibilities as a mother." She claimed she was just thinking about me. I knew well enough that arguing back would only cause more problems. "Thank you, sister-in-law. Yes, you're right. I should be more careful." I chose non-confrontational words, but she huffed and said, "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can be lazy. So start cleaning this house right now. You're lacking exercise, right? You can at least do that much." She then handed me a broom and dustpan she had picked up from nearby and demanded that I clean. But after being scolded by my mother-in-law and my husband for harassing me, she sulked and secluded herself in an upstairs room. "I'm sorry, Alice. She just showed up at the house all of a sudden. I told her to leave." Mother-in-law apologized with a regretful look on her face. "It's fine, mother-in-law. I'm not bothered." "I'm sorry, Alice. That's just how my sister is." My husband also apologized along with mother-in-law. After that, we spent a pleasant time together, enjoying the apple pie mother-in-law had made and sipping on tea. We called out to Brianna too, but there was no response. Although we were worried, she never showed up in the end. However, I had no idea that a shocking incident would occur just a few days later. It happened when I went to my in-laws' house alone because I needed to speak with mother-in-law. As I wondered why the front door was unlocked, I discovered Brianna in the living room. "Sister-in-law, what brings you here? I heard from mother-in-law that you had to work today." "I wasn't in the mood, so I took the day off. And I was surprised to see you here. You disrupted my cleaning last time. Now please, get back to work." With that, she thrust the broom and dustpan back at me. I decided to clean as much as I could to avoid any trouble. But that day, I was feeling discomfort from early morning, and during the cleaning, I began to feel pain in my stomach. Just as I thought of taking a short break, my sister-in-law kicked my stomach, which resulted in my water breaking. The pain escalated, and I fell down on the spot. It hurts! Somebody, please help!" I took out my mobile phone from my pocket and quickly dialed mother-in-law. "The baby is in trouble." I managed to utter these words before losing consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself in a hospital bed with an IV in my arm, and my body was wrapped in an electric blanket. Where am I? Wait, what about my baby? I tried to sit up, but the pain in my abdomen stopped me. Not only that, my stomach, which was supposed to be large, had shrunk, and I was shocked. I pressed the nurse call button, and when the nurse came, I asked what had happened. Apparently, my water had broken, and I had to give birth via emergency cesarean. The baby was small and therefore in an incubator, but was said to be in good health. Mother-in-law and my husband, who had rushed in, were also informed by the doctor. Their faces were red with anger. I decided to visit the baby once I felt better, and tried to sleep as much as possible to recover quickly. However, the next day, an unbelievable person showed up in my room. It was my sister-in-law, who had kicked me, and her husband. They walked into the room without even knocking. I frowned at their impudence. And when the two absurd people suggested, "We'll pay you. Let's settle this," I felt a chill. When I didn't agree, they lashed out at me with every offensive word they could think of, towards my tired face from the cesarean operation. Thinking that my daughter had to go through such a thing because of these people, something inside me snapped. "A settlement? Are you kidding me? Don't make me laugh. I'll ruin your life." The two of them were enraged by my words and continued to shout at me. What are you saying? We're offering a solution with money here. Aren't you thankful? Alice, didn't your parents teach you to obey your elders? We're telling you to settle. Just agree, quietly. My brother-in-law also joined in, and as we were arguing, forgetting it was a hospital room, the door suddenly swung open, loudly. "I've heard everything. I'm sorry, but I have absolutely no intention of settling." My husband has a good build and is tall, so his deep voice was imposing. They didn't seem to expect my husband to show up, and the two who were talking so confidently until now were completely taken aback. Long time no see, Finn. It's a coincidence to meet you here." My brother-in-law said this, but his face seemed tense. "It truly is a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you here, and I never imagined I'd hear such words from you two. I would appreciate an explanation." We were all in the room when they said it, so there's no room for any excuses. Hey, don't be so angry, Finn. It's not like we had ill intentions. We just feel bad for what we did to Alice. That's why we're offering money, hoping to settle this out of court. My sister-in-law explained with a trembling voice, but my husband's fury didn't subside. The one who decides whether this will be a settlement or not is Alice, not you. Besides, do you think this is a situation that can be solved with money? Alice had an emergency C-section. The baby's in an incubator. You endangered both their lives. Do you even understand that? My husband exploded, letting his emotions get the best of him. As for me, I also couldn't forgive them just because they were throwing money at us. I agree with my husband. No amount of money can make this right. You will face the consequences of your actions. It seemed like my sister-in-law assumed that throwing money at us would make us forgive them. But this situation was not that simple. Thankfully, both my daughter and I, although she was in an incubator, were fine. But had there been any mistake, we might not be here now, and it seemed like my sister-in-law was entirely oblivious to this. I suspected my brother-in-law felt the same way. Thinking about this, I realized I couldn't forgive them or consider a settlement lightly. At my words, my sister-in-law flared up and raised her voice. What do you mean? This is all because of her. She knew I couldn't get pregnant, and yet she kept rubbing her belly in front of me. Was that a jab at me? I was furious. That's why I did what I did, to make sure she never does anything like that again. Now I knew why she had kicked me, but there was something that didn't make sense. I hadn't met her often since I got pregnant, and every time she saw me, she would go into her room and not come out. So how did she see me rubbing my belly? That part was a mystery to me. But no matter what she said now, it wouldn't erase what she had done. Neither my husband nor I had any intention of forgiving her. I understand that you're struggling, but that doesn't justify doing something like this to Alice. No matter the reason, endangering a life is never acceptable. My husband explained the obvious to them, but they were each looking elsewhere, not even trying to listen to us. It seemed like they wanted to get over with this as soon as possible. Seeing the two of them not showing any remorse, I felt my condition worsen. Are we done here? I just had surgery and I'm not feeling well. If you continue to cause a ruckus in this room, I'll call the police. Arguing here wasn't going to resolve anything, and talking to the two of them was too hard for me, as I was still recovering. After my husband kicked them out, I sighed heavily. We had enough evidence because my husband had recorded their conversation. My mother-in-law was also unable to contain her anger because of what her daughter had done, putting my life and that of her grandchild in danger. And so, we decided to press charges against my sister-in-law. We filed a complaint with the police. My sister-in-law was taken to the police station. Afterwards, through a lawyer, we started negotiations. But my sister-in-law insisted to the lawyer, I've done nothing wrong. This woman has been flaunting her pregnancy in front of me, causing me emotional distress when I myself am struggling with infertility. She's not innocent either, so she should be open to a settlement. At first, she had been eager to pay any amount of money, but then she began to claim her innocence. She insisted we should just pretend none of this happened because we were both at fault. When she first saw my husband in the hospital, she was visibly intimidated. But now, determined to avoid paying, she put up a stubborn fight throughout the process. However, she had no idea our conversation in the hospital room had been recorded. As soon as the evidence was presented, both their faces turned ashen. Even with such clear evidence, you still claim your innocence? I'm afraid that won't fly. After enduring so much insult and our refusal to agree to a settlement, my sister-in-law, in anger, flung the coffee that was before her at us. Thankfully, the coffee was cold, so we didn't get burned. Furthermore, their outrageous behavior and language in the office resulted in additional charges, forcing them to increase the compensation amount. Trying to calm his infuriated wife, my brother-in-law left the office. With the assault charges against me and the current incident, the amount we demanded from my sister-in-law had become substantial. When we told my mother-in-law about what had happened, she looked deeply remorseful, saying, I'm so sorry for what my daughter has done. There's no need for you to agree to a settlement. I'll make sure she faces the consequences. She apologized tearfully. I couldn't help but think, how could a grown-up cause so much distress to their own parents? Somehow, I felt incredibly sorry for my mother-in-law. In the end, my sister-in-law was asked to pay a hefty compensation. Shocked by the amount, she called me repeatedly, insisting that we should reduce the amount because we were both at fault. I could not comprehend how she could make such an argument after all she had done. No matter how many times you call, the answer remains the same. We have no intention to reduce the amount, nor to agree to a settlement. Honestly, your calls are becoming a nuisance. Please stop. Because she was so persistent, I ended up snapping at her. This caused her to lose her temper, and, unbelievably, she barged into my apartment. Hey, you're there, right? I know you're in there. Get out here, now! Coward. I was resting on the sofa due to the pain from my surgery when she started pounding on the door and shouting these incomprehensible insults. Hey, what on earth are you doing? Is everything okay with you? Your shouting is disturbing everyone else. Please stop. I yelled back at her while she continued to bang on the door. There were elderly people and families with babies in the apartment. Despite it being past 8 p.m., she was causing such a ruckus. I wondered if she ever considered that people might be sleeping. Of course, my husband was still at work and hadn't returned home. Since I got discharged from the hospital, I've been visiting my daughter every day. Feeling unwell and dealing with her unannounced visit and the commotion, I was at my wit's end. No matter how many times you come here, my mind won't change. Please don't come here anymore, I said, fighting back despite feeling unwell and pale. But my sister-in-law was desperate for a settlement, and my concerns seemed to be irrelevant to her. I didn't do this because I wanted to, you know. It's because of your intrusions that things have come to this. It's presumptuous of you to get pregnant before me. Shouldn't you have been more considerate and waited to get pregnant after us? It seemed like she saw pregnancy as some sort of competition. I don't think pregnancy is a competition, or that it's more honorable to get pregnant first. But for my sister-in-law, who has struggled with infertility for many years, it seemed like she viewed pregnancy in that way. Everyone has different values, but that's no excuse to hurt others. I understand you're upset about not being able to have children, but that's no reason to hurt others. So I cannot forgive you. You put my daughter in danger, and for that, you will be held responsible. Above everything else, the fact that she had hurt my daughter was unforgivable. Just then, the sound of sirens could be heard from outside. It seems that someone in the apartment had reported the disturbance. Well, I suppose if you're banging on someone's door and yelling at this hour, it's inevitable that the police would be called. What do you mean the police are here? Open the door! You have to hide me! Despite my sister-in-law's pleas for me to hide her, I had no intention of doing so. The police arrived at the apartment and began questioning her. I also explained the situation from my perspective. Just at that moment, my husband came back to the apartment, and I filled him in on what had happened. Considering what had happened before, my husband told the police everything, and they took my sister-in-law away in their car. That night, my brother-in-law called to tell me that he was divorcing my sister-in-law and asked me not to involve him in this issue, a rather self-serving request. Apparently, one of my husband's colleagues had been at the hospital where I was admitted, and he overheard my brother-in-law's conversation. When he got to work, the gossip spread among the female employees, and my brother-in-law was looked down upon. The situation worsened, and somehow the story reached the HR department. My brother-in-law, realizing he couldn't talk his way out of it, confessed everything. He was then told that someone like him couldn't stay in the company and was going to be transferred to a regional office. So he doesn't want to get involved in any more problems. I can't deal with her issues anymore. If any more problems arise, I'll be fired. So please leave me out of it. With that, he hung up, and I haven't heard from him since. Afterward, we received a substantial compensation from my sister-in-law, and to ensure she would never come near us again, we changed our phone numbers and moved away. Even if she ran out of money and needed help, she wouldn't know where to find us. A few months later, my daughter was discharged from the hospital. She didn't have any lingering effects and was growing up healthy. Rumor has it that my sister-in-law was in substantial debt. At first, she was moving from friend to friend, but she was never contributing to the living expenses and stayed for far too long, so they kicked her out. My sister-in-law, who has no place to live and no money, is working part-time to pay off her debt.
My name is Emily, and I'm 29 years old. I've been married to my husband for 2 years, and I've recently become a full-time homemaker after experiencing childbirth for the first time. Despite the struggles I faced due to postpartum, the cuteness of my angelic son makes all my fatigue vanish. I can't help but gush. He has pure, adorable eyes. I bet he'll grow up to be a handsome boy. I'm already head over heels as a proud mother. However, despite my happiness, I have a problem. It's the presence of my mother-in-law, who visits us almost daily. My in-laws live about a 30-minute walk away. My mother-in-law started coming over to support me postpartum as a substitute for my busy husband and my parents who live far away. Although her help would normally be appreciated, she does little to actually assist me. Instead, she just lounges on the sofa, watching her Korean soap opera DVDs that she brings along. She's more of a burden than a help, expecting me to serve her tea and fetch her tissues. She was the one who offered to help, but what is she here for exactly? I have tried telling her, "I'm fine, you can go home," but I ended up getting an earful from my husband later that night. Undoubtedly, my mother-in-law complained to him about being sent away. Even though I asked him to stop because our son was crying, my husband still snapped at me. He's a real mama's boy. I wish I could go back in time and punch my past self for not noticing this before we got married. He insists that I replicate his mother's recipes and even tries to make me dress more like her. No matter what I say, my husband worships his mother as if she's a goddess. However, I continued to discuss the matter with my husband. "We don't need to rely on your mom. It would help so much if you could just help me out a little." "What? I work all day and I'm exhausted. Besides, I bet the baby is happier when you take care of him." Even when I'm talking to him, his eyes are always glued to the TV or his phone, showing no sign of being engaged in the conversation. Does he not care about our son? I'm just as exhausted as he is. With my eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, fatigue, and stress, I glare at him. "Don't you dare complain to my dad. He's also busy and won't tolerate any unnecessary drama." For a moment, he turned his gaze to me, and my husband spoke as if to warn me. My father-in-law is nearing retirement, but still works a lot. I know he is busy. However, it would be a great comfort if he, who treats me like his daughter, could say something to my husband or mother-in-law. As I recall my conversations with my husband, my mother-in-law's inconsiderate voice snaps me back to reality. "Emily, the baby is fussing. Hurry up and soothe him down. It's the fun part of the drama now," she calls, not taking her eyes off of the TV screen. I stop folding the laundry to attend to my son. As I pass the back of my engrossed mother-in-law, I stick my tongue out at her in my mind. Being worn out from children and sleep deprivation, her presence, doing nothing but hanging around, has become a major source of stress for me. However, it has nothing to do with my son. If my husband is not willing to help, then I am the only one left for my son.
Well, I should get going,
She finally says when the clock strikes 5. She quickly gets up from the sofa, uses my dressing table as if it's her own, fixes her makeup perfectly, and goes out into the twilight city. Apparently, she is taking dance classes for her health and to maintain her beauty. From the time we met to discuss our wedding, she would brag, saying,
I used to be a model, so it's a habit for me to stay presentable.
"Thanks to that, people always think I'm younger than I actually am. It's a pain." She is 58, but admittedly, she does look younger than her age. That being said, if she's going to classes this late, she should just go during the day, instead of wasting time at my house.
Grandma doesn't do anything, does she?
As I spoke to my son in my arms, he was soundly asleep, gently breathing. An hour later, the doorbell rang. It was my father-in-law. Having been thoroughly tired of my mother-in-law's behavior for days on end, I ignored my husband's advice and had been secretly discussing the matter with my father-in-law over the phone. My father-in-law wanted to see his grandson's face, so he had made time out of his busy schedule to come and visit us. Looking at my sleeping son, my father-in-law, whose expression was softer than my husband's, chuckled.
He is so adorable.
So, she left in the evening today for her dance class without helping out the house again today? My father-in-law sighed as he looked around the mess in my house. Guessing from his response, it seemed he just found out about his wife attending dance classes. Seeing the state of my house, he must have realized that his wife really hadn't been helping out at all. My father-in-law bowed his head and apologized to me. "It's not your fault," I rushed to say, but he shook his head.
My wife herself said she would support you, Emily. But this, I'll see to it that she doesn't come here from tomorrow. And I understand my son may not be much of a help. But if there's anything you need, let me know anytime.
"Thank you so much," I responded gratefully. It seemed that my father-in-law was also worried about my husband's lack of interest in housework and childcare. For the first time in a long time, I felt the touch of kindness, and it brought tears to my eyes. About 3 months have passed since my father-in-law started visiting us. Thanks to him, my mother-in-law had stopped coming to our house. My mood has been brighter ever since. I never knew I could feel this relieved just by her not coming. My son has even been able to hold up his hand now, and I've been able to spare a little more time for housework. Oh, it's a mess again. I sighed as I spotted the state of my half-open husband's room. Dirty shirts and socks were scattered all over the floor. I threw them in the laundry basket and decided to sweep the floor while I was at it. As I shoved the cleaning tool under the bed, I felt something was off. Did I hit something? As I maneuvered the cleaning tool, a clear file slid out with the bank book inside. Gosh, he's such a slob, I muttered. I picked up the bank book and set it on my husband's desk, and suddenly my breath hitched. I realized it was not my husband's bank book, but the one we'd set up for our son. Why was our son's bank book in my husband's room when I always kept it somewhere else? Currently, the only money in the account was the generous amount gifted from my parents and my father-in-law for the birth of our son. It was a considerable amount saved for our son's future. A sense of dread crept over me as I tentatively opened the bank book. All the money in it was withdrawn. Out of impulse, I opened my husband's desk drawer and pulled out his bank book. Even though I knew I shouldn't, I couldn't stop myself. Just as I thought, I muttered. Opening my husband's bank book, I found that the entire bonus he'd just received was withdrawn. Moreover, the remaining balance was too low. My mind went blank. Even as I heard my son crying in distance, I was too stunned to rush to him as I usually would. A few hours later, when my husband came back from work, I confronted him. He was initially angry that I had entered his room and looked through his things, but eventually confessed.
I was financially helping my mother.
What? Why would you need to support your mother? And I can't believe you do something like this without telling me. You even dipped into our child's savings. This is not okay. My husband angrily thumped his desk as I confronted him.
Look, I only help out because my mom said she was struggling, okay? She's probably got problems we know nothing about. Besides, it's my hard-earned money. If you have so many complaints, maybe we should just get a divorce, he grumbled. Our son, who had been gently snoring in his crib, woke up and started crying. My husband argued with me and disturbed our son's sleep. I hurried over to him and lifted him up in my arms. The money you earned? The money in the account was a generous gift from our parents for our son. You can't claim it. Both your dad and my parents gifted us thinking about our son's future. Don't you feel guilty at all? And I'd appreciate if you would stop mentioning divorce so thoughtlessly, I retorted, watching our son, now cradled in my arms and calming down from his tears. My husband snorted with a look of annoyance. Then he presented a sheet of paper on the desk. It was a divorce paper, and his section was already filled out. I was shocked, and my eyes widened in surprise. I wouldn't mind getting a divorce anytime, to be honest. But you wouldn't want to be struggling financially, burdened with a newborn baby,
he said, seemingly thinking this would shut me up. My feelings started to recede at my husband's childish behavior. That's when I realized something. He had never once held our son. Seeing me silent, my husband laughed, almost as if he was certain of his upper hand.
So from now on, please pay the living expenses from your own pocket,
he added nonchalantly, tapping my shoulder before leaving the room. As the living room door closed, I sank to the floor, exhausted. Tears naturally flowed down my cheeks. My son, nestled in my arms, stretched out his little hand to me and giggled innocently. I had made up my mind. The next day, I submitted the paper he'd handed me to the city hall. Afterwards, I got on an Amtrak train. I left a note saying, "I'll submit the divorce papers and will be claiming alimony and reimbursement for the money you used, along with my wedding ring." I was concerned about taking our newborn baby outside, but he seemed intrigued by the new surroundings and was fortunately in a good mood. I braced myself to take extra care of his health. I was headed to my parents' house in Michigan. I only brought essentials for our son and had a few of my valuables, so I didn't have much luggage. My parents, having been informed the previous night, were ready to welcome us. After hearing my husband and his mother's actions, they were enraged, but they smiled kindly and suggested that I help them with their family business and raise my son here. My parents ran a fruit farm. It was a tough job, but I had helped out since I was a kid and had some experience and knowledge. I began to think that it might not be so bad. The next day, while I was enjoying a rare moment of relaxation, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Reluctantly, I answered the call.
Emily, what the hell is this about?
The moment I put the phone to my ear, a shrill scream pierced through. Somewhat irked, I replied, "Who are you?"
Huh?
Taken aback by my nonchalant response, my mother-in-law stuttered. Feigning recollection, I exaggeratedly said, "Oh, is it you, mother-in-law? I'd completely forgotten about you since I've already divorced your son." My somewhat light-hearted reply seemed to shake her.
Emily, do you realize what you've done? Acting so selfishly.
I assumed my husband had to run to her, not expecting me to really go through with the divorce. It made sense that she was panicked enough to call. Selfish? I think the problem lies with your son, who presented me with a signed divorce agreement as a threat. Though it worked out just fine for me, I responded calmly. She didn't seem to understand.
I'll forgive you for this. Get to married to my son. He's so upset, he's crying right now.
I wondered if he was still by her side. The image of my husband watching me talk on the phone with my mother-in-law, tears welling up in his eyes, sent a chill down my spine. At the same time, I was utterly speechless at his determination to somehow get his mother to intervene.
Enough is enough. I don't need a mama's boy for a husband, or a mother-in-law who spends her night in male strip clubs. Huh?
My mother-in-law choked on her words from the other end of the phone.
How do you know that?
It was clear she reacted to the mention of the gentleman's club. This happened last night. After my husband left the living room, I pulled out my phone. One call was to my parents to tell them I planned on divorce and coming home. The other was to my father-in-law, to whom I owe gratitude and an apology, to explain the situation. That's when my father-in-law revealed everything to me. The reason mother-in-law had been practically living at our house was to visit a male strip club that opened at 6 p.m. There were various reasons she stayed at our place during the day. The first being our house was closer to the club than hers. Plus, by spending her days at our house, she could avoid chores at her own place. She also used me and our son as excuses to get back late. All this worked in my mother-in-law's favor. Apparently, she had taken quite a fancy to one of the dancers at the club and had been spending a lot on him. It was hard to believe that my mother-in-law, who had always been a homemaker, had any money of her own, and she couldn't even drink alcohol because of her low intolerance. She had been withdrawing money from the bank account my father-in-law maintained, buying drinks for the dancers, while sipping sodas herself. My father-in-law had been suspicious of my mother-in-law after I asked about her. Despite being forbidden from coming to our house, my mother-in-law continued to find reasons to go out for a while. Realizing something was off, he followed her and discovered she had been a regular at a strip club. He was deeply shocked to find out about her escapades and the misses of his bank account.
To think she'd even take money from her son and grandson. If only I'd found out sooner. I am deeply sorry, Emily. And to my grandson as well.
The gravity of my father-in-law's guilt and apologies over the phone, having learned about our situation, was overwhelming. You lied to my husband for money because she didn't have enough to lavish on those entertainers, didn't you? My mother-in-law remained silent at my accusation. I could hear her husband's voice over the phone saying, "Mom, tell me that is all a lie." It seemed he had been listening after all. After a moment of silence, my mother-in-law erupted in anger.
Don't use such vulgar words like lavish. I'm just showing Chris my affection. He loves it when I visit him.
Chris must be her favorite dancer's name. I sighed at my mother-in-law's pathetic outburst. The thought of my son's money being spent on her entertainment boiled my blood again. Neither my father-in-law nor I will let this slide. You better be ready, ma'am. I ended the call and switched off my phone. A few days later, I received a call from my husband who made a sincere apology about the misuse of money and his mother's actions. Regarding the divorce papers, he admitted that it was only on his mother's insistence, saying, "If she bothers you, just show her the divorce papers. She'll stop bothering you." And he wasn't serious about it. He was deeply regretful about being fooled by his mother, who he trusted unconditionally and, eventually, driving us to divorce. He seemed to have finally woken up.
I'm truly sorry. I've transferred $20,000 into your account as a token of my remorse, including the misused money and for the inconveniences caused. I hope this shows my sincerity. Let's start over and create a happy family. I need you, Emily, just as much as you need me.
His words made my skin crawl. Reconciliation is not an option. I only need my son. From now on, I'll need child support. We can discuss this further with our lawyers. I knew that the $20,000 was the money my father-in-law had lent my husband. It was the money saved for his retirement, separate from the account my mother-in-law had been spending from. From now on, my husband would have to work hard to repay his father and provide child support for our son. He'd also be under his father's surveillance. My husband, who believed I would be forgiving him, was in tears and apologizing. But it was too late. I said goodbye and ended the call and promptly blocked his contact. 2 months have passed since the discussion with my husband, facilitated by our lawyers, was completed. Right now, I'm assisting at my parents' orchard, while also dedicating myself to child rearing. After my divorce from my husband, I've continued to keep in touch with my father-in-law. Sometimes he comes over to see my son. Through conversations with my father-in-law, I learned that my mother-in-law had secretly accrued debt. My father-in-law, who had secretly been preparing for divorce, showed no mercy and kicked my mother-in-law out. Now it seems my ex-husband reluctantly took in his mother, and they're living together. Both my ex-husband and his mother are forced to work to repay the debts and are living under extreme poverty. As I look into my son's innocent eyes, I'm determined to raise him so he doesn't end up like his father or my mother-in-law.
Believe it or not, this restaurant is ours and it's meant for my oldest son and his wife. If you don't like it, then get a divorce,
yelled my husband in a fit of rage. Following him, my husband's brother, now called Mike, made his arrogant claim.
I'm part of this family too, you know. Surely I deserve some part in the restaurant.
Not to be left out, Mike's wife Karen also berated me. You don't deserve to run such a fine establishment. Get out already. I felt a surge of anger within me. I couldn't care less about what happened to these people. I decided there and then to put them in their place once and for all. The first order of business to correct their misguided notions. I can't help but smirk at the thought of the look on their faces when they find out the truth. My name is Natalie Farrell. At 35, I'm running a sushi restaurant. I have many regular customers and thankfully the business is doing well. The shop was originally started by my grandparents. Both of my parents passed away from illness when I was young, so my grandparents became my guardians. As I helped out in the shop, I became interested in becoming a sushi chef and taking over the shop. After graduating from the culinary school, I started working in the restaurant immediately. I learned how to make sushi from my grandfather and how to serve customers from my grandmother. Thanks to their guidance, I became a competent chef and developed proper etiquette. For a while, the three of us ran the shop. But when I turned 23, a man named Steve Farrell came to our shop. He was 5 years older than me. He used to be a sushi chef, but the shop he had been working at had closed down, so he was looking for a new job. My grandparents were considering retirement due to their old age. They had mentioned that they wanted one more employee, so we decided to hire him. His skills were undeniable, and he quickly became a valuable asset. I learned a lot from him, and we eventually grew close and got married when I was 25. My grandparents thought Steve was a reliable and honest man and they felt secure with him. Our married life went well, and after my grandparents retired, we continued to run the shop together, supporting each other. However, when I was 31, my grandmother passed away from an illness. The following year, my grandfather also passed away. Since then, my husband's attitude started to change gradually. When I was in the kitchen, he would become grumpy and started saying things like,
You should focus on serving the customers. I want to hone my sushi making skills, so I want to be in the kitchen as much as possible.
Since he was so passionate about sushi, I understood and began to take over more of the serving duties. However, the real reason behind my husband's change of attitude was something different. About half a year later, I overheard him saying something on the phone.
Natalie is a woman, right? I don't like the fact that she's a sushi chef.
I was very sad. I was shocked to learn that my loving husband thought this way about me. Sushi is a traditional dish and there is a strong tradition of male dominance in this field. Therefore, the number of female sushi chefs is low. However, this attitude is starting to change and there are more restaurants accepting female chefs. And I believe I am able to provide sushi that satisfies our customers. I wish he wouldn't dislike me just because I'm a woman. After hanging up the phone, my husband finally noticed my presence and hastily tried to gloss over his comments.
I was just stressed out and said it without thinking. I promise I won't say it again. Will you forgive me?
Seeing him seemingly regretful, I decided to forgive him. However, my husband started causing more problems. One day, I noticed that $3,000 had been withdrawn from our savings account. When I confronted him, he said,
My brother Mike lost his job and I had to help him out. He's family after all. There's nothing we can do.
Frankly, I didn't like it. The reason being, Mike is a problematic person. He initially aimed to be a chef, but quit early due to the rigorous training and has been job hopping ever since. Every time we met, he would ask for money, and he gave off a very irresponsible impression. His wife, Karen, also can't hold a job. Despite this, she always had an aggressive attitude towards me, saying things like, "You must be so tired from working all the time. I'm a housewife, so I enjoy my free life." I wondered if there was any need to support these people with hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're adults and they're healthy. I wish they could figure it out for themselves. Our restaurant was profitable, but our savings were steadily decreasing. At first, when I pointed out to him that he was giving too much, he seemed to reflect on his behavior and said, "Sorry." But later on, he said,
Natalie, you're the one managing our savings and household budget, right? You should just manage it better.
and refused to listen to my advice. The situation with my husband was getting worse, and I was starting to worry seriously about our future savings. I briefly considered divorce, but eventually decided against it. Steve is an excellent craftsman, and without him, our restaurant would suffer. Besides, Steve has always been a responsible person. I clung to this thin hope that he would pull himself together someday. Later, I would realize how naive this thought was. Years have passed since my grandparents passed away, and we arrive at the present day. At this point, an event occurred that I could no longer tolerate. On our restaurant's day off, while I was doing the laundry at home, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Mike and Karen.
Hey, from today on, I can eat sushi every day now, right? Lucky me.
Their words made no sense. As I was at a loss, Steve appeared and I demanded an explanation. Casually, he said,
They will be living with us for a while from today on.
I was even more confused. Upon further inquiry, I learned that Mike and Karen were in dire financial straits and couldn't even afford their apartment rent. Upon learning this, Steve had taken it upon himself to allow them to stay with us for a while. What's more, neither Mike nor Karen were working, so we were expected to cover their living expenses as well. I told Steve, "Don't make decisions like that without discussing with me first." But he shrugged it off, saying,
They're our family, so it doesn't matter.
and so their cohabitation began forcibly. Needless to say, my stress levels skyrocketed. Not only this, but Steve took Mike and Karen to our restaurant and allowed them to eat expensive sushi for free. They ate up sushi without a care in the world, chattering and making noise. Steve even announced in front of our other customers,
I'll treat my brother and Karen.
even our regular customers seemed to find this odd. One of our regulars, a man named Tucker, frowned and warned Steve.
Steve, it's not right to let them eat for free just because they're your family. It will affect the restaurant's business, won't it?
Steve pretended to reflect upon his words, saying,
I'm sorry.
Tucker is our regular customer, and we have been close since I was a child. He's like a beloved grandfather to me, and he's always there for me, saying,
If you ever have a hard time, feel free to talk to me.
However, despite Tucker's warning, Steve didn't stop giving preferential treatment to Mike and Karen. Steve never scolded Mike and always showed a soft smile towards Karen. Watching Steve like this, a suspicion began to form in my mind. I hope I was just misunderstanding, but my suspicion would later prove correct. When my stress was at its breaking point, a major incident occurred. One day off, Steve, Mike, and Karen told me they had important news.
Actually, we have decided to hand over our restaurant to Mike and Karen. It's been Mike's dream to become a chef, and we thought it would be a good idea.
I felt dizzy. Running a restaurant is tough. I couldn't believe that Mike and Karen could manage it, and I didn't want to give the restaurant that we inherited from our grandparents to people like them. I firmly told them. Then Steve, Mike, and Karen all became furious. Steve yelled at me loudly.
That's my restaurant. What I do with it is my business. Whether you like it or not, the restaurant will belong to Mike and Karen. If you don't like it, get a divorce.
Mike also arrogantly said,
I'm part of the family too, right? Just give me the restaurant.
Karen berated me, saying, "You're not worthy of that restaurant. Get out quickly." I was filled with intense anger. I no longer cared what happened to these people. I decided to retaliate against them once and for all. First, I decided to correct the three's misunderstanding. I chuckled to myself, wondering what their faces would look like once they learned the truth. I don't know what you guys are misunderstanding, but the restaurant is something I inherited from my grandparents. It's in my name, so I can't transfer it to Steve, Mike, or Karen. As I explained this, my husband looked surprised.
But I'm your husband. I should have the right to do as I please with the restaurant.
Inheritances go to blood relatives. Since we don't have children, my inheritance is mine alone. Steve finally seemed to understand the mechanics of inheritance and was stunned. I was almost dumbfounded by his lack of common sense because Steve was so dedicated to sushi he lacked some common knowledge. I have often felt this way in our married life. Then, Mike started to make a fuss.
Hey, you should have explained this beforehand.
I finally raised my voice in anger. What? You guys were the ones who proceeded with the conversation based on your misunderstandings. You didn't even give me the time to explain. What are you saying? Annoyingly, Mike tried to counter further.
But we don't care about whose name it's in. We can run the restaurant on our own. You're no longer needed, so get out.
I really decided to leave if I stayed here any longer. I thought I might explode with anger. I packed only the essentials, said goodbye, and stormed out of the house. After leaving the house, I initially stayed in a cheap business hotel. There, I strategized about what to do next. I had no desire to make amends with Steve. I had finally realized that the kind Steve was nowhere to be found. I don't know if that was his true nature or if something had twisted his personality. But suddenly, I felt foolish for trusting such a horrible man. I wanted to punish him. I also wanted Mike and Karen to leave my house. I wondered how I could drive them out. After thinking about it, I made various calls and formally launched a revenge plan. I also went out for a bit, and after about a week, my preparations were complete. So I returned home. Seeing me, Steve and the couple looked triumphant. Steve smirked and looked at me.
Hey, finally reflecting and came back, huh? But returning in just a week, you lack resolve.
Hearing this, the couple laughed heartily. Suppressing my anger, I showed them several photos. They were stunned at that moment, but Steve and Karen's faces turned pale. Meanwhile, Mike asked in confusion,
"What are these photos?"
"These are photos proving Steve and Karen's affair," I declared in a cold tone. The photos showed Steve and Karen walking arm in arm, appearing to enjoy themselves. The other photos also captured their intimate moments. Mike finally seemed to understand the situation and began to blush in anger.
Hey, what is this? You have betrayed me with an affair?
Mike's anger was fierce. However, Steve didn't apologize but instead doubled down.
Shut up. It can't be helped. I fell in love. You were wandering around outside and I happened to go out with Karen.
Karen also began making pitiful excuses. "It's your fault for not working. Compared to that, Steve is a respectable artisan. It's clear who I would choose." Karen hasn't been working either, and Steve, who's having an affair, is not someone trustworthy at all. I was beyond angry and more disgusted. The three of them had started a low-level argument and it seemed like it was spiraling out of control. Somehow, I managed to calm them down despite the frustration bubbling within me. Once he had calmed down a bit, my husband glared at me.
How did you get these photos? You've been following us?
"No," I replied. "I hired a detective to gather evidence of your affair. That's how I got these pictures. So that's why I had been visiting a detective agency." My husband ranted.
"Hiring a detective is coward."
But the real coward was my adulterous husband. Well, it's unlikely he would understand that. Then Mike asked a question.
How did you realize my brother was having an affair? You must have suspected something to hire a detective.
I let out a chuckle. Of course, I could tell we are married after all. I noticed right away how excessively sweet he was acting around Karen. The smile he had for her was completely different from the one he showed me or our customers. My husband was speechless. He must have thought he wouldn't get caught. In his shock, he revealed too much in front of my grandparents. How he had acted as innocent as a cat, how he had married me for my shop, how he didn't really love me, and so on. I looked at him coldly, my heart aching. Despite loving you so much, I was betrayed by you. I have endured a lot of pain. Do you understand how much I have suffered? Can you imagine how much you have made me worry? At my harsh words, my husband finally fell silent. He looked remorseful, but I had no intention of forgiving him. Steve and Karen were silent too, probably feeling awkward. Finally, there was some quiet, and I continued. I will be claiming damages from both Karen and Steve. Be prepared. At these words, Karen erupted, Wait, I have no money. How can you claim damages from someone like me? I cut off Karen's words. All you have to do is work and earn money. You can pay in installments. It's inconceivable to hurt someone and not make amends. Karen, looking shocked, could only manage a weak, okay, and then fell silent again. I took out the divorce papers I had already filled out and made my husband fill in the necessary parts. All I have to do now is submit these to the office, and I can say goodbye to the bothersome man. The matter of the affair was now more or less settled. However, there was still something left to be done by the three of them. I asked them, You didn't just cause me trouble, did you? The three of them looked clueless. They really didn't seem to understand, so I reluctantly explained, You treated the customers of our shop poorly, right? I have been in regular contact with our regulars over the past week, and they all voiced their complaints. The main complaints were that despite the many mistakes, they never apologized, and they loudly insulted customers in the staff-only area. There was even a claim that Mike tried to steal change. When I told them about these complaints, their faces turned pale. Since you have caused so much trouble for our valued customers, I will have you apologize. I am going to call our regulars now and have you apologize. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, I briefly explained the situation, and then my husband, Mike, and Karen apologized in that order. We repeated this process several times. All of our regulars were understandably angry at the three, so the apology took much longer than expected. I knew Tucker's address, so I had them go and apologize to him directly. When Tucker saw the three, he raised his voice. You were absolutely terrible. How dare you face people with that attitude? No matter how delicious your sushis are, I will never have them again. Then he looked at me and smiled kindly. Natalie, you should cut ties with these people. Even if Steve leaves, a more skilled artisan will come to your place. Yes, I am divorcing my husband too. Thank you for all your help. I'm truly grateful. Before carrying out this plan, I had also sought advice from Tucker, which had proven immensely helpful. I thanked him deeply. After leaving Tucker's house, I made sure to let Mike, Steve, and Karen know that I had reported all their misdeeds, including their infidelity, to our regulars. You three might want to continue working as chefs, but I don't think our regulars will be visiting your restaurants. If they tell others, those people probably won't either, I said, adding insult to injury. Even if the three didn't run a restaurant, the mental damage of their embarrassment being known to so many people would be significant. I told them to pack their things and get out immediately, which they did. After they were kicked out, they seemed to get into a heated argument about what to do next. They were making such a commotion in the street that the police were called and they were taken away. They were trouble to the end. The three didn't end up with criminal records, but they did split up and started living separately. Mike and Karen got divorced too. I submitted the divorce papers to the government office and cleanly cut ties with my husband. Mike is still unemployed and living a poor life. I heard he's struggling daily to dodge debt collectors because of the substantial debt he owes. As I promised, I demanded alimony from my husband and Karen. Karen seems to have found a job for now. However, she was unemployed for a long time, so she can't suddenly become a high earner, and her salary seems to be quite low compared to her peers. My husband also managed to find a job and relocated to a remote state where he didn't know anyone. Yet rumors have a way of leaking out, and their past wrongdoings became known, leaving them with no place to hide. In particular, my husband and Karen have to keep working to pay their debts. I imagine their days are tougher than they expected. I hope they suffer. Even after my husband left, the restaurant is doing well. My regulars who learned about the incident started coming to the restaurant more frequently to support me. I had fewer chances to be in the kitchen due to my husband, but I have been practicing in secret, so my skills haven't deteriorated. The enjoyable days have returned and I'm living a fulfilling life. We have also gained a new employee. She's a girl who just graduated from vocational school. She's still an apprentice and has a lot to learn, but I sense a flair in her. Her attitude towards the customers is excellent, so she is well regarded among the regulars. Since we're both women, we found it easier to connect with each other, and she sometimes confides in me about her worries. I think we're building a good relationship. I even consider having her inherit the restaurant in the future, but I intend to keep doing my best as an active chef for now. While cherishing this restaurant that I inherited from my grandparents, I wanted to keep growing both as a sushi chef and as an individual.
I'm Michelle. I usually work from home, but once a month I travel for work. Another exhausting trip. I'm off tomorrow, so I'm planning to unwind with a massage and then hit the sack. Just as I was thinking this and about to unlock my front door, for some reason, the chain lock is on the door. I live in a high-rise apartment downtown with my husband Ryan. We have been married for 3 years. I assumed he got home before me. "Hey Ryan, you home, right?" I called out to my husband Ryan. No answer from inside, but I hear the TV from the back room. He is definitely in there. Feeling certain, I call out louder. "Ryan, it's me, Michelle. The chain lock is on, so could you unlock it?" Suddenly, I hear heavy footsteps approach, and a face peers through the door gap. It's my mother-in-law. "Would you quit yelling? You're disturbing the neighbors." "What? Mother-in-law? Is there a problem if it's me?" "No, I just wasn't expecting you." "Huh. Well, this is a good time to tell you need to leave this place." I'm stunned by her sudden declaration. More importantly, this is my apartment. Yes, I bought this high-rise apartment and I'm the one paying the mortgage and everything. Why would I have to leave? Confused, I managed to ask mother-in-law, why should I leave? You wouldn't get it, you home buddy." "Home buddy?" "In short, this apartment now belongs to me." "What? What do you mean?" "I changed the title to my name so you can't enter this room." Mother-in-law says this with a triumphant look. I'm speechless, but one thing's for sure, I'm not at fault here. There's no point in arguing when I'm already tired. It seems like we should discuss this calmly. I asked mother-in-law, "So you really want me to leave?" "Yes, that's what I've been saying. Just go already." "Understood." "Huh? You're surprisingly agreeable." Arguing is a hassle. Excuse me. With that, I stepped back into the elevator. Come to think of it, mother-in-law has always had it out for me, like when I went to Ryan's family meeting. Mother-in-law bluntly told me, "I can't live with you." Well, I never said I wanted to live with you either. As I replied, mother-in-law retorted as if I were a back-talking child. "It doesn't matter what you think. I don't want to live with you." I see. "If you have an issue with it, we can call off the engagement." What is she talking about? I thought to myself. Anyway, it's clear mother-in-law doesn't want to live with me. Well, that makes things simple. "I get what you're saying, mother-in-law. So you're breaking up the engagement?" Mother-in-law sneered. "No, I meant we won't live together." "Oh, okay then." Mother-in-law looked displeased. I was really ticked off. If you really want to cancel the engagement, just say you don't approve of the marriage, I thought. As if she heard my thoughts, mother-in-law shouted, "Fine, I don't approve of the marriage." "Why not? I also agree we shouldn't live together." Well, she didn't seem to have a reason. Maybe she just likes complaining. Fortunately, father-in-law intervened and sorted things out. But mother-in-law continued to oppose our marriage, like when I brought up the age difference. Actually, I'm older than... As soon as I said that, mother-in-law became furious. An older wife? That's unthinkable. Will you really be submissive to your husband? The idea of a woman being submissive to a man is outdated. It's all about equality now. There is no rule that a wife should be submissive to her husband or that younger people should obey older ones. We're supposed to support each other in life. That's what modern marriage is all about. But it seems like mother-in-law doesn't see it that way. She thinks a wife should be younger and always follow her husband's lead. What an old-fashioned mindset she has. In any case, our perspectives were too different. My mother-in-law didn't like me, that much was clear. And so the tension between my mother-in-law and me continued to linger. How can I counteract this? After pondering, I chose to live in a high-rise condo. Ryan agreed to the arrangement provided I handle the mortgage. I knew it wasn't a small commitment financially speaking, but I wanted to send a clear message to my mother-in-law that cohabiting was off the table, and it worked. She stopped criticizing me. However, this only meant she stopped complaining about our living arrangements and marriage. She still didn't like me. So every once in a while, she would visit and start criticizing me, most annoyingly about household chores. In her mind, I was a stay-at-home wife who neglected housework. That's far from the truth. I'm a travel magazine writer. I even travel on site once a month for stories. But I spend the majority of my time in front of a computer, so if mother-in-law sees me, she assumes I'm not working. Our visits usually turn into arguments because of this. You have time to play, so do some housework. I am actually working right now. What? You're just messing around on your computer. No, I'm working. You're really bad at lying. Work is something you do at an office. At first, I would always argue that I was working, but as these confrontations became routine, they grew tiresome. I mean, we're not living together, so a bit of patience won't hurt. If I can just get through this now, the rest will sort itself out. Arguing is a waste of time, so I started brushing her off. My mother-in-law didn't seem to find this amusing. She started telling me, you neither work nor do chores. You're lazy. Get out. You're in the way. Though she's not a permanent resident in my home, she still visits, so I've started ignoring her completely. It feels like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. However, one thing still concerns me. That's the relationship between Ryan and my mother-in-law. Ryan and his mother are close. That's not a bad thing, but they have stayed close even after Ryan and I got married. Of course, they're family, so I can't say they shouldn't be close, but there is a limit to everything. When I'm away on assignments, they meet secretly at our house. If they were open about it, it would be fine, but sneaking around makes me wonder if they're up to something. Are they talking behind my back? Are they plotting to kick me out? These dark thoughts have crossed my mind. Just the other day, I had a rare overseas business trip. I was heading to Southeast Asia, assigned by my editors to write an article targeting the holiday season. When I told Ryan about the trip, he said,
Lucky you, getting to travel overseas for work?
it's not a vacation, it's for an assignment.
But you'll be touring tourist spots, right?
Well, yes, but
Then it's almost like a vacation.
Ryan seemed simply envious. Sure, an overseas trip can be fun if there's time, but usually the schedule is packed and there's hardly time to shop for souvenirs, so it's not all that glamorous. I tried explaining this to Ryan, but he didn't get it.
I wouldn't understand your world. Makes me realize how mundane my life is.
He seemed genuinely envious, but that didn't ease my concerns. What if they're conspiring against me when I'm gone? What would I do in that situation? My mind raced with these thoughts. Feeling anxious, I wanted to consult someone. That's it. The lawyer our editorial department has on retainer might listen to my concerns. So I consulted with Lauren, a female lawyer who our department contracts with. And that's what's been happening. After listening, Lauren thought for a moment and said, if anything happens, I'll handle it. Are you sure? Absolutely. However, it will be a separate fee from the department's contract. That's no problem. And so I gained a powerful ally. Feeling reassured, I went on my business trip. And when I got back, I faced mother-in-law's new attitude. She was talking about changing the house title and telling me the homeowner to move out. Unbelievable. I had reached the end of my rope. I can't take it anymore. I'm going to give my mother-in-law a piece of my mind. Kicked out of my own home by my mother-in-law, I yelled this while alone in the elevator. Once out of the high-rise apartment, I immediately called Lauren. I explained what had happened. Lauren told me, "All right, let's sort this out tomorrow. Can you do that?" Yes, I had no plans tomorrow anyway. Thank you so much. So it was settled. Lauren and I would confront my mother-in-law together. I stayed in a business hotel near the train station that night to prepare for the following day. After a good night's sleep, I met up with Lauren near the station. We went over our plans in detail at a nearby family restaurant. After that, I contacted someone, and then Lauren and I headed to my house. When I rang the doorbell, I heard my mother-in-law's voice. "Hello? Hello?" She popped her head out, visibly pleased. "Hello, mother-in-law." "Oh, I thought it was a delivery. Too bad, we're coming in." No, you can't. You left on your own." "This is my house. If you refuse, I'll call the police right here." I said this as a final warning, but she didn't seem to care. She boldly told us, "The police? Go ahead and call them. Didn't I tell you that the house is in my name?" This is going nowhere, I thought, and made eye contact with Lauren. Lauren nodded and asked, "May we have a moment?" "What do you want?" "I'm Lauren, Michelle's attorney. I'm here at her request." "And why would an attorney come?" "It's a delicate matter, so perhaps inside would be best." "I refuse. I won't let strangers into my home." That should be my line. As I thought this, Lauren sighed and said, "Fine, let's let the neighbors hear about your crime." My mother-in-law's face changed color. Suddenly flustered, she said to me, "Michelle, make her stop talking." "That's not happening. All you have to do is let us in." "Ugh, fine, come in." Mother-in-law backed down and I could finally return home, but let's be clear, this is just the beginning. Walking into the living room pumped up, I found Ryan laughing in front of the TV.
Mom, where's the luggage?
Ryan looks up. "I'm back, Ryan."
What, Michelle?
What's with that reaction? Got something to hide?
No, you said you left, so I'm just surprised is all.
Fine, whatever. Ryan, come over here. I gestured and Ryan reluctantly got up and sat at the table. So here we were, sitting across from mother-in-law and her gang, and the conversation began. In the tense atmosphere, mother-in-law was the first to speak. "Bold of you to come back home under these circumstances. Well, it's my house." As I retorted, mother-in-law's face turned sour. "For the last time, it's my house now. The ownership's been transferred." "Is that true?" When I questioned her, mother-in-law treated me coldly. "Of course, changing house ownership is easy. Guess you wouldn't know being a shut-in." Mother-in-law had a smug smile. When I looked at Lauren, she questioned mother-in-law. "Earlier, you mentioned changing the house ownership. Are you sure about that?" "Don't act all high and mighty just because you're a lawyer. Stop making me repeat myself." "Then who prepared the quitclaim deed?" I did." Mother-in-law seemed a bit flustered. I quickly realized she was lying. But Lauren saw a different issue. "In this case, the current owner, Michelle, would have to create and sign the deed. So you forged it?" Forged? "Yes. That's document forgery, and I will report you to the authorities." Wait a minute. That's not true. I had someone do the paperwork." "Who?" "A liar I know." I had a hunch that this was a lie too, but for Lauren, whether it was a lie or not didn't seem to matter. Lauren kept the conversation going in a composed manner. "So let's talk more about this lawyer later." Mother-in-law looked visibly relieved. However, this respite is short-lived. Lauren doesn't let up. "Next, let's discuss the matter of the mortgage." "The mortgage?" "Yes, the home loan. In simple terms, the remaining balance." I don't know anything about that." If there is an outstanding mortgage, changing the property title is a breach of contract. You would have to pay the remaining balance in full. You didn't know that? Well, you changed the property title without even knowing these details?" "No, it's not that. Michelle said she would give it to me." "This is ridiculous. No one would give away a home they're living in. And we have only been living here for a few years with a mortgage still being paid off. Mother-in-law's claims makes no sense." But Lauren has a different angle. "So you're saying the property was transferred to you?" Yes, transferred. That's right. It was given to me." Mother-in-law brazenly declares this. Lauren then brings out a calculator. "If it was transferred, you will need to pay federal taxes. Please provide the details." "Federal taxes? Depending on the property value, it could be a substantial amount. Lauren flashes a knowing smile. Meanwhile, mother-in-law and Ryan exchange pale-faced glances. The next moment, mother-in-law changes her tune.
No, that's not it. I bought it from Michelle. There are no federal taxes when you buy, right?
Either way, you'll need to pay property taxes. Maybe you should consult your lawyer for specifics.
A lawyer?
Whether it was transferred or purchased, you will still need to pay taxes. Lauren is blunt about it. When mother-in-law and Ryan can't respond, Lauren asks, "What will you do?" They remain utterly silent. After a few awkward minutes, mother-in-law finally speaks.
I apologize. I lied about changing the property title.
So you were lying after all? I shout at mother-in-law, who shrinks back and says,
No, I didn't mean to deceive.
"What did you mean then?"
Well, I was trying to cause a divorce.
Mother-in-law began to explain why she had done all this. The story dates back to the day before I left for an overseas business trip. That day, mother-in-law had a petty argument with father-in-law. Tit for tat, the argument quickly escalated. Father-in-law shouted at mother-in-law,
I'm sick of you always wasting money.
What are you talking about? I'm sick of you not making enough money too.
What did you say?
I said go earn more money.
That's it. I want a divorce.
And just like that, the in-laws decided to divorce, but then mother-in-law had a moment of clarity. Even though she complained about father-in-law not making enough, they had been living comfortably on his income. If they divorced, she would have to live on her savings alone. That would definitely decrease her quality of life.
I don't want that. How can I maintain my lifestyle?
After much thought, she concluded that moving in with us was the answer. But when I got married, I made it clear we wouldn't live together. I can't go back on my word now. After weighing her options, she decided to kick me out and live just with Ryan. So Ryan, you agree with mother-in-law to kick me out? Ryan stammered. Mother-in-law prodded Ryan.
Come on, Ryan agreed, didn't he?
Well,
Speak clearly. Say you want a divorce.
Despite mother-in-law's encouragement, Ryan couldn't bring himself to say it. I know why Ryan couldn't say it outright. If mother-in-law knew the reason, she would never suggest I divorce him. But after being treated this poorly, there's no way I could forgive them, so I brought up divorce first. Fine, let's get a divorce.
Oh, finally, Michelle and I agree on something.
See? Even mother-in-law says so. Let's use this opportunity to divorce. Ryan looked down and silently nodded. Thinking I had won, I looked at Lauren. Lauren pulled out the divorce papers from her bag and said, Here are the divorce papers. I'll go over them, so please sign here.
Okay.
Ryan quietly responded. We signed the divorce papers right then and there. Continuing from the previous scenario, I watched with a smirk. Finally, Ryan finished signing the divorce papers and handed them over.
Is this good enough?
I confirmed the signature with Lauren. So, you are officially divorced now. Lauren placed the divorce papers into her bag. At that moment, mother-in-law raised her voice.
Now Michelle is a stranger to us. Get out immediately.
Why should I? Smiling wickedly, mother-in-law said,
You initiated the divorce, so as compensation, I'll take this house.
But you were the one who first mentioned divorce, weren't you?
Huh? I don't know anything about that.
Mother-in-law feigned innocence, but it was so blatant it was almost refreshing. Regardless, I had no intention of paying her a dime, so I told her, This all started because of your lie, mother-in-law. Let's talk about compensation.
No way, we're not paying you a single cent. Tell her, Ryan.
Mother-in-law nudges Ryan. Then Ryan, who had been silent, suddenly stands up.
Yeah. Since the divorce is finalized, maybe I should say something.
You're suddenly confident? I asked, and Ryan pulled out photos from his pocket and started ranting.
Michelle, you said you were on a business trip overseas, but you were actually having an affair, weren't you?
What? An affair?
This is the evidence, this photo.
Ryan slammed the photo onto the table with a thud. A photo? I looked at the photo puzzled. Indeed, I was in it, along with a photographer from the editorial department.
Is this guy your lover? I have been following you. I saw you two getting cozy. You cheated.
He's just a photographer from the editorial department. He was there to take photos.
Liar, I saw it myself.
Ryan insisted. I sighed. This might be more trouble than I thought. Just then, Lauren muttered, This isn't proof of infidelity.
What did you say?
All these photos show that you are together. If you say you were doing an interview, there is no denying that.
So what? Just being together is enough. It's cheating.
In light of Ryan's words, I had reached the end of my rope. Slowly, I placed my laptop on the table and opened it so that both Ryan and my mother-in-law could see the screen.
What's that?
Ryan asked me. With an icy stare, I retorted, I knew you were following me. I have pictures taken by a photographer to prove it. Immediately, I showed them the saved photos to my laptop. Ryan, arm in arm with another woman. Even more shocking, the location was the beach at the tourist spot we had visited for a report.
What's this all about?
I was stunned to find you in these pictures taken by the photographer while capturing landscapes. You in the middle of an affair.
No, it's not what it looks like. She was just helping me tail you.
Oh, so being together means an affair, right? Thinking he was putting me on the spot, Ryan had shot himself in the foot with his own words. He was left speechless, but I wasn't going to let it go that easily. You can't even hold down a job, yet you find the time to cheat? Expect a bill for damages. When I said that, my mother-in-law started to object.
It's your fault for being cheated on. Men who work for major corporations face a lot of temptations.
Oh, sure. A grocery store is a major corporation in its own right.
A grocery store?
Yes, Ryan works at a grocery store. He's just a part-time employee.
What? A major corporation, you said?
That was Ryan's big lie.
I can't believe it.
My mother-in-law was floored. By the way, I have invited that woman here as well. The three of you can sort this out. A few minutes later, the woman from the photo arrived at my house. In truth, I had arranged for a staff member to make contact with the woman under the guise of an interview. I had already arranged for her to come here before I even showed up by getting her contact details under the guise of thanking her. Needless to say, she and Ryan had quite the argument. She didn't even know that Ryan was married. He had told her I was his sister. Eventually, the police got involved and Ryan was forced to quit his part-time job. Last I heard, Ryan and his penniless mother had moved to an apartment they could barely afford with their small savings. They're scraping by with day-to-day jobs, but who knows how long that will last. Either way, it's none of my business anymore. As for me, I have divorced and I'm feeling light as a feather. For the foreseeable future, I'm focusing on my work and trying to forget about that cheating man.
My name is Noelle. I'm a 40-year-old housewife. Today, I'd like to talk about my family. I have a husband who is the same age as me and a daughter who just turned 16 recently. I met my husband in college. We fell in love and got married. Nothing out of the ordinary. Unlike me, who has a rough personality, he is a very meticulous person. He had a peculiar obsession with how things were placed and was the kind of person who would not be satisfied until things were arranged to his liking. I felt some discomfort with him since we were dating. Yet I had this feeling that marriage would change us for the better, but reality wasn't so sweet. After we got married, his meticulousness only increased. I had to adjust every aspect of my life to conform to his rules. No matter how tolerant I am, I can't accept all of his behaviors. Sometimes we would even end up in heated arguments. Every day passed in such a blur that there was not even a moment when I could rest. My daughter was born in the midst of such circumstances. My husband was delighted with our daughter, who came into our lives 2 years after our marriage. I thought this might bring some peace to our daily life. I was relieved, just by myself. However, my husband's attitude changed dramatically soon after. When a child is born, it's normal to adjust the rhythm of life to suit the child. Yet my husband didn't like that he couldn't keep his routine, and when our daughter squealed in the middle of the night, he would hurl strong words at her. Furthermore, he declared that he would not involve himself in child-rearing at all. I don't know how many times I have tried to divorce him because of his selfish attitude. Still, for the sake of our daughter, I gritted my teeth and endured. Every day, I fought desperately to protect my daughter, risking my own life. As if to mock my struggles, another tragedy was about to strike. and the cause was the very existence of the daughter I had fought so hard to protect. It's often said that children resemble their fathers, but I absolutely didn't want my precious daughter to resemble that man. Fortunately, her facial expressions were similar to mine. I thought everything would be okay. I believed so, but despite my wishes, as she grew up, her personality started to resemble my husband more and more. Around the age of 10, she started complaining about my cooking and became upset or threw tantrums when she didn't like the way things were placed or cleaned. Lately, with the onset of her rebellious phase, she even started to hurl harsh words at me. Of course, I didn't always let her have her way and often argued back. As if to break my heart, my husband sided with our daughter and started blaming me. When attacked by both of them, I couldn't fight back. Ultimately, my life became one where I was being constantly criticized, and then the day finally arrived. From the morning, I was feeling lethargic. I had a slight fever and was feeling dizzy. I was so unsteady that I couldn't walk straight in the house. I couldn't even stand and was stuck sitting on a chair. Despite seeing me in this state, neither my husband nor daughter said a single kind word. Instead, he barked at me. "Hey, where did you put my tie? The red one, the one I used 2 months ago." "Hey, did you wash my socks?" "Mom, where did you put them?" Thus, they were only thinking of themselves. It's just a tie, just socks. Why do they make such a big deal out of such trivial matters? Couldn't they pay attention to me just for today? Somehow in my hazy consciousness, I managed to see them off, and then I collapsed in the hallway. The next thing I saw was the familiar ceiling of the living room. I had been sleeping on the couch. It seems I had moved to the living room unconsciously. Although I was still feeling tired, thanks to a good rest, my condition had improved. I was awake, but there was a pleasant feeling as if part of my brain was still asleep. Being unwell was the cause, but I wonder when the last time I have slept so soundly. I gave up trying to escape from that comfort and went back to sleep. When I woke up next, it was already dark outside, and when I reflexively looked at the clock, it was past 5 in the evening. I felt the blood drain from my body all at once. I hadn't done most of the household chores, such as laundry and dinner preparation. I have to at least make dinner. I jumped up and headed to the kitchen. Since there was no time to go shopping, I managed to put together a menu using only leftovers. "I'm home." My daughter came home at the worst possible time while I was still scrambling. "Wait, you're still making dinner? That sucks." "I'm sorry, it'll be ready soon." Ignoring my apology, my daughter went into her room. Soon after, my husband came home from work. "What, you're still cooking dinner?" His words were filled with obvious discomfort. He has a meticulous routine after coming home, so he must have noticed something was different. After saying only that, my husband went into his room. He starts eating 15 minutes after he begins to change his clothes. That was also part of his routine. This means I only had 15 minutes left. I cooked desperately. Even if the cutting was rough, even if I messed up the seasoning, I couldn't stop cooking. If I didn't finish before my husband came out of his room, I wouldn't know what would happen. I managed to finish plating just before my husband came out of his room. I made it. I could feel the tension draining from my body. But then, what the hell? Who could eat this? That was my husband's outcry. "What's wrong?" "What's wrong, you say? You have some nerve asking that." My husband was inexplicably worked up. I didn't understand the cause of his anger. "This stir-fry, you overcooked it. The color is off, and the vegetables aren't even uniformly cut." "I'm sorry, I was a bit pressed for time today." "Time? You're not working. You have plenty of time." I couldn't forgive that single sentence. As if I wasn't doing anything at all. Why do I have to be spoken down to by a husband who doesn't even notice my discomfort? I have no time at all. Before I knew it, I was screaming with all my might. Do you have any idea how much I struggle every day? In a rush of emotion, I found myself screaming. It seemed to be an unexpected reaction for my husband. I saw him take a step back, his eyes filled with a frightened look. What struggle? House chores can be done at your own pace, isn't it easy? He challenged. What do you know? It's not like I can just do them at my own pace, I countered. By then, I couldn't stop myself. I was feeling really sick today, you know. I pushed through and made dinner, and you didn't even take a bite. How do you think that makes me feel? I felt tears trickling down my cheeks. The emotions I had been holding back had finally exploded. Seeing my husband's face turn pale, I managed to calm down a bit. I was short of breath. My breathing was disrupted and I felt dizzy from all the shouting. But still, I waited for my husband's response. A simple apology, a single "I'm sorry" would have been enough. Don't mess with me. That tiny spark of hope was extinguished by his trembling words. Do you have any idea how much I struggle in the world to support our family? So you're saying I'm just living easy and free? I'm saying your job is to support me so I can focus on my work. That's just an excuse. I'm not your slave. Don't talk back to me. Just a little more and my husband would have raised his hand at me. I knew it instinctively, but I couldn't back down now. As I prepared to confront him with my next words, it happened. What on earth are you doing? Our daughter burst out of her room. Your voices can be heard outside. Stop it. It's embarrassing. Don't stop me. It's her talking nonsense that's the problem. It's you being selfish. Just be quiet. My daughter's reprimand made us stop arguing. Then I explained to her what had happened. After hearing both me and my husband's sides, my daughter turned to me and said, Honestly, Mom, you're the one who's wrong. Her words shocked me to the core. Why? Because housework is your job, isn't it? Dad can't afford to take time off work, even when he's not feeling well. That's right, you're too lenient on yourself. My husband's face as he spoke after my daughter filled me with resentment. Mom is always late with her chores. Even today, you haven't done the laundry yet. That's right, and you're not efficient. You can't even fold the laundry properly. Their words shattered my emotions into pieces. So you're both saying I'm not trying hard enough? Maybe you're not trying hard enough. I could probably do it better and faster. Yeah, you're too laid back. I bet we could manage without you, Mom. My daughter's words cut deeper than anything else. So was I the dispensable person? I thought we were a family, but could they dismiss me so easily? Having been confronted with this cruel reality, I found myself running out of the house. Before I knew it, I was in a pitch-dark park with no streetlights. My feet hurt. Sitting on a park bench, I realized that I had run out without even putting on my shoes. My tears had long since dried up, and my mind was blank. How long had I been sitting like this? Even if I stopped thinking, the harsh words would never disappear. My heart wouldn't heal. Recalling the words of my husband and daughter, I could feel my broken heart filling with resentment. I will never forgive them. They, my family who trampled on my feelings, must face punishment. My fighting spirit was quietly burning. The next morning, I flawlessly finished the cleaning and laundry. And for breakfast, I prepared a menu as extravagant as a dinner at a famous restaurant. By the time I finished preparations, my husband and daughter arrived in the living room almost simultaneously. Without making eye contact with me, They both took their seats. "Come on, let's have breakfast." Upon my words, their faces seemed to stiffen even more. "Mom, what's going on? Today's breakfast is really fancy." Instead of my frozen husband, my daughter asked me, "Well, isn't it your 16th birthday today? Did you forget?" "Huh? Yeah, I did forget." "You should at least remember your own birthday. Right, Dad?" "Huh? Yeah." After exchanging curt conversation, the two started breakfast with awkward movements. The dining table was not filled with cheerful conversations, and it was clear that both were fully observing my behavior. Was it because they were unaware that they had hurt someone, or just didn't want to admit it? It's understandable with my husband. After all, he's a stranger. But my daughter, she's the one I gave birth to and raised. I wished she would grow up to be a more considerate, kind person. It's not entirely wrong to say that daughters resemble their fathers, but she should have been able to understand with proper upbringing. I do have regrets, but it's a moot point now. Listen, just one word from me changed their expressions. What's going on?" My husband's voice shook as he asked back. "Starting today, I'm leaving this house." At that moment, they both paled simultaneously. "Hold on. Why?" "Why? You said you could do the housework better than me." "I didn't say anything like that." "Yes, you did. I'm sure you said it. I have never cut off my daughter's words so strongly until now." Whether she was shaken by my attitude or not, she didn't argue further. Next was my husband's turn. "You also said it. You said I have more free time than you because I'm at home." "I didn't mean it like that." "Does such an excuse work in the real world?" He didn't answer. "Don't misunderstand. I'm moving to another house starting today, but it doesn't mean I won't come to this house." "Stop. Today's my birthday, right? You're going to celebrate, right?" My daughter pleaded with a face that seemed about to cry. I looked at her face and laughed. "I'm sorry. I'm serious about this." As I watched my daughter crumble on the spot, I quietly stood up. "Well, I'm off." I left the house to the sound of my husband and daughter's screams. That day, I booked a room in a hotel a short distance from the house. From there, I rented an apartment on a monthly basis and started buying the necessary items. Even while I was busy, my phone was flooded with messages from the two. Apology messages and calls from my daughter were coming in every 5 minutes. My husband, it seems, is still unable to admit his fault. I keep receiving messages from him saying things like, "What you did was outrageous." I've left all the messages from the two of them unread. It's really convenient these days being able to show my intentions without doing anything. 2 nights after leaving the house, I returned home once. As I opened the front door, my daughter came running up to me at an amazing speed. "Mom, you came back." "I just came back to pick up something I forgot." I untangled myself from my daughter's arms, which were wrapped around me like a hug, and headed for the living room. Since I had only been gone for 2 days, there was no change in the living room as expected. However, the kitchen was piled high with convenience store lunchboxes, ramen cups, and bottles. Worse than that was the bathroom. Laundry had been left unwashed there. Both my husband and daughter often complain about the way I cook and fold the laundry. However, neither of them can do household chores like cooking and laundry at all. Of course, knowing that, I left home, so the current disaster is within my expectations. My husband was in the living room, but due to his pride, he turned his face away after just a glance at me. I pulled away from a sobbing daughter and left the house silently that day. 1 week later, when I returned home to check on them, the house was already filled with garbage. These two who never clean up or even take out the trash. Even so, the mess was far beyond my expectations. Mom! My daughter's face, which emerged as if pushing through the garbage, was horribly dirty and her hair was disheveled. She should be able to take a bath by herself, but it was clear that her life was falling apart at an unsustainable level. And at this point, my husband finally admitted his fault. I was wrong. I'm really sorry. My husband kneeling on the garbage, rubbing his forehead against the garbage. Looking at him, I gently said, "Don't think you're going to be forgiven just by prostrating yourself." I felt a moment when the air froze for the first time. My husband's face, with his eyes wide open, was filled with despair. Next to me, my daughter was breaking down in tears. "If you really feel sorry, first clean up this house. If you can't do that, I'll divorce you." I get it, so please, forgive me." My husband jumped up and started to stir the trash around. He doesn't even know how to clean up in the first place, so it can't be helped. In the end, I proceeded with the cleaning while giving instructions to the two of them. It wasn't until 3 days later that everything was perfectly cleaned up. Now, shall we continue the birthday party? My husband and daughter lying in the living room, which is now cleaner than before. Looking down at the two of them, I deliberately said that cheerfully. From then on, all the housework was taken over by my husband. Even my daughter, who used to side with her father, is now on my side. Those days were very hard and painful, but now I realize that it was necessary.